Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Planning and Zoning Commission for Thursday, April 17th. I would like to note that we have an established quorum and a move for any approval of the minutes for April 3rd and April 6th.
Mr. Chair,
Billy?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for April 3rd, 2023 and April 6th, 2023.
Yeah, first I have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, moving on. Recognize the persons not on the agenda. Seeing none, we'll move on from that. Conflict of interest and ex parte contacts for declarations. I do have to say that on the fourth item for our public hearing this evening, I will be recusing myself. Billy will be taking over, and I will be putting myself into the audience as I am a employee of the Mountain Home School District, and so we don't want any matters with that. We are going to actually skip over public hearing and action for this evening. We're going to move to old business first, if council is okay with that. Commission, not council. Commission's okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, so old business, we have the action item for an approved finding of fact for the conditional use permit for Hunter Christensen and Blue Terra Development, a conditional use permit to allow for an RV park in a C3 zone. We are just looking for findings of facts.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the finding of fact for PZ 2313.
Okay, first I have a second.
Second.
Second by Billy. Travis?
Aye.
Billy?
Aye.
Christine?
Aye.
And holy cow, I apologize. Scott?
Scott.
Aye.
And aye for me as well. My brain stopped working. Next item this evening is annexation for, I'm sorry, is it, help me with the name. Gisela, thank you. I don't want to do that wrong. Gisela Light, a request to annex and zone to C4 two parcels located at 1125 and 1135 Air Base Road. Before we do that, Mr. Sherry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to make sure that this body knows that we do have an affidavit of legal interest from Ms. Light for the annexation. However, note that when this recommendation goes to City Council, it is her intent to only annex the northern portion, not the southern portion. So,
Okay.
she's here. If this body has any questions for her, she's been awesome to work with from the staff perspective. And we just wanted to make sure that everything was buttoned up. We know there was some ambiguity at the last meeting, and we wanted to make sure that this body felt comfortable with any recommendation that you choose to make.
I just have one question. Has it been noted in the finding of facts that it's only the north and not the south that's being annexed?
So this is where I need to address legal. It's changed.
It says it's just the northernmost parcel on the findings of fact.
Well, there you have it.
On the finding of fact that, sorry, Chairman, on the findings of fact in our packet, item 2 is describing both parcels.
Oh, it does have both.
Yes. And the reason for that was because we need to, the findings of fact need to be what was heard then. But the reason that I'm wishing to bring this up right now is so that it will be in the minutes, so we know the intention of Ms. Light. I don't believe this is necessarily a material change. If it is, legal will direct us towards a different process, being that she is simply wishing to annex less than what was formally proposed.
Jeff?
However, because it's a Category A annexation, is at the request of the owner of the property. The owner of the property requested to annex both parcels, and this body is recommending, well, this body doesn't have any recommendation as to the annexation. This body has a recommendation as to how the annexed parcels are to be zoned. So the annexation, the act of annexation, is purely the role of the city council. So the city council can annex or not annex that which they choose to.
Understood.
The only thing that this body does is say it should be zoned as a C4.
Yep.
So
So we don't need to rewrite or redo anything based on...
your recommendation is that the property be zoned C4 should it be annexed. That's it.
Commission, any other questions?
No,
Oh, that covers me.
it's pretty clear.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the findings of fact for PZ 23-17.
Okay, first by Christine, second. Second by Billy. Travis? Aye. Billy?
Aye.
Christine?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Aye for me as well. Motion does pass. Okay, let's go ahead and go back up to public hearing action for number 5. So our first one this evening is a zoning title amendment from Mr. Cherry, the Community Development Director, to request to amend City Code by addition of Chapter 1, Title 9, Section 7, Chapter 3, Title 9, Section 2, Chapter 7, Title 9, Section 4. The additions will outright permit all City of Mountain Home facilities and structures, provide a definition for city facilities and structures, and update the zoning land use chart to illustrate all of City of Mountain Home facilities and structures as permitted. Mr. Cherry.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we are very familiar with the zoning title amendment. This is something that we started in the fall of last year. We've had a lot of good discussion on it. We had the opportunity to meet with City Council to discuss their concerns and kind of get their insight. I think, are we going to be able to draft something that makes everyone full of rainbows and flowers and totally happy? Probably not, but I do believe in drafting something that works for most, that most people can get behind. So based on those discussions, I have proposed in my staff report the following change. So what we established early on during the Planning and Zoning Commission meetings, that the residential property rights of our residents is something that's paramount. And we want to make sure that a local entity doesn't have total discretion to potentially disrupt those rights. And then during our meeting with City Council, there was concern of, well, what about residential uses which are right on the edge next to commercial and or industrial uses that would potentially be missed? Or what about residential uses that exist in commercial and industrial areas? So what I attempted was a general catch-all, which is essentially we have those land uses, which are in footnote 7, which are all these ones, which we went through individually, and we kind of took out these scary ones that we would definitely want our residents to have some sort of notice of and some sort of voice if that was to be coming close to their place of residence. And essentially, what we have laid out is that a conditional use permit will be required for those land uses in all residential districts, or if the proposed land use is 500 feet from a residential district, or a residential use measured in a straight line to the nearest dwelling or building entrance. It's very clear. It's, as far as the city enforcing it and having that knowledge, a residential certificate of occupancy in a commercial district is something really easy to go off of. It's very easy to track. I think we tried capturing the intent of those rights and privileges that we wanted to protect for our residents, while still allowing the city to conduct its business and to ensure that we can construct our facilities and or structures in an efficient manner. It is my opinion as the community development director, this is kind of my last round. If the city council or this body is to not see this as fit and we want to work on it a bit more, this could be something that we just put on the shelf, wait a couple of years, see what changes, and then perhaps we take it off. But I think this last add-on is fairly substantial, and I think it definitely improves the proposed ordinance. So with that, does the body have any questions before opening it up for public hearing?
Chairman? I have one question real quick. In terms of the zoning districts in the 9-7-4 land use chart, we have permitted asterisk through R1 through LO/R.
Yep.
being that we're intending on having this as a conditional use permit, should those be
Those uses,
listed as Cs rather than Ps with an
no,
asterisk?
so for all of these uses, irregardless if in the underlying zoning district that is traditionally a C or an I1, for these uses right here that are specifically named, all of these would require a conditional use permit.
And
Whether they be in the district, or within 500 feet of a district, or 500 feet from a residential use within one of those districts.
So if we have a situation where something that's not captured within subsection 7 that would be considered a nuisance, or, I mean, obviously, like, we can't capture every single use the city might ever come up with, that would then just be permitted
So
under this?
the
If it's not,
beautiful thing about our use chart, and I'll let legal explain this, if a land use isn't in the use chart, essentially it's not allowed.
Not permitted.
So would it fall under the same, excuse me if I can, would it fall under the same precedence of having to come to this body first?
It would definitely be a phone call to legal about what do we do if we cannot determine it falling under one of the existing land uses.
Yeah, so if a land use, so you can't do anything goes approach and conditionally permit anything. That's been tried and that's not lawful. So you either have to permit a category of uses that are definable or specific uses in the land use table. Those are the permitted ones. If it's not listed on the chart, it's not permitted. It's not, if it's not listed as permitted or conditional, it's prohibited. So if there's a use that shows up that the city wants to embark on that isn't in this enumerated list, or isn't one of the other land uses, then it's not a permitted use.
That makes sense.
So, for example, nuclear power plant does not show up on the list. Wouldn't be able to build one. Now, the school could.
It's ancillary.
Anyway,
Does that answer your question, Scott?
yeah, I mean, I certainly see the point in making this modification to ordinance, but again, my worry is because we have a strictly black and white enumerated list, that we don't know where that cone of uncertainty in the future leads us.
Well, and
If it's
that's,
not permitted and it's strictly not permitted if it's not stated, then I guess that probably covers us. And then we'll have to come back and make
I would
for the
recommend
process.
probably our next,
So let me clarify, if I might, Mr. Chairman. So in 917, at the beginning of the sentence, or the beginning of the paragraph, he's described those things that shall be outright permitted with some degree of specificity. There's a little bit of generality, but providing facilities, buildings, structures, signs, permanent equipment, and the like to administer goods and services of the city of Mountain Home. So we're going to build a satellite city hall somewhere. It's an outright permitted use. However, it's not an outright permitted use and requires a conditional use permit if, in the delivery of goods and services to the citizens of Mountain Home, you have to open a city auto body shop, or a helicopter landing pad, or a new rifle range for the police, or a place to clean our uniforms, crushing stone at the, for the street department, and so on and so forth. Does that help a little?
It does. It does. I guess my point is 20 years ago, we wouldn't have known what fiber service was and how we're instating it today. So for us to have a list that would encompass all those future possibilities is going to be very difficult.
so, and this is where, so when I was in Twin Falls, I was a project leader for their code rewrite. And the portion of the code that we spent more time on than anything else, which literally took years, was definitions. It is, our next piece of homework, looking at the zoning code that we have. I believe every land use should have a definition. It helps for interpretation. When definitions are written right, they can be somewhat over, and they're able to be broad enough to allow new innovation to come, such as a city utility definition, which maybe fiber could go underneath that. But that's neither here nor there. But I wanted to point out that there certainly are things that we can do to better our code, Commissioner Harjo, and I think that's probably one of the next things we really need to do is have a robust definition section and have a definition for every land use that is described.
Sure. Thank you.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but signs are on here, and signs used to be a conditional use permit from the city, were they not?
Yes,
So now signs are no longer a conditional use permit and outright permitted no matter what.
that is what is in there, yes.
Why the change?
Why the change? That is what is in the code, and structures such as a sign are very similar to city facilities. If there were certain things that we wanted to change to the signs to make it safer for individuals to have more buy-in for a sign that could be disruptive, I could see us putting in some things. But when I think of city signs, typically they fall into the same realm as a city facility and or city building.
So not to bring up anything that probably shouldn't, so a big gigantic green mountain home sign is no longer going to be under conditional use permit that we never saw because it's a sign, correct?
I can't confirm about that project.
Okay. Commission, any other questions before we open it up? Okay, we'll open up to public hearing if anybody likes to come up and have a conversation about the zoning title amendment. I didn't think so. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that. All right, Commission, it's up to you.
I'll have some edits, so it's in ordinance format. Substantively, it'll be exactly the same. If you could send me a word, I don't think I have one.
So, Mr. Chair, if I may.
Go ahead.
Can you, go over the sign ordinance one more time? Because that is.
Good point.
Good point.
Well, so, didn't we do a public hearing not too long ago over a sign that was going to be lit? And because it was lit, we needed to apply the same principles for a conditional use permit and not have it just be outright permitted.
Mm-hmm.
So then wouldn't the city have to go through that as well?
Not if it's outright permitted.
So then we're saying it's okay to just go ahead and outright permit it.
That's
That was my only hiccup when I started reading that.
If I can, I think she's onto something as far as the illumination. I think that's concerning to me. I know that it's a tiny, tiny part of the code. Now that you bring that up, that's not something I caught. Kudos to you, but that's a little concerning.
I mean, if it's in the downtown corridor, whatever. But if it's, I don't know, across the street from Silverstone, or across the street from Morning View or Colonial Estates or
Even-
any one of those,
Even they put one on the Parks and Rec construction building there
yeah.
on Fifth.
Right,
Yeah, yeah, that's
Yeah,
15,
because you have residential there. So then what now? Because residential's right there. I mean, it's a sign, but I'm thinking more along the lines of light pollution.
I mean, in that instance, with the new verbiage, it does have within 500 feet of residential.
That's true. That is true.
Expressly stated. So,
Asterisk.
yeah.
Would a potential proposed recommendation or amendment be that if the signage is illuminated, that it should potentially fall under that footnote 7.
I would be okay with that, as long as there's a conversation or a discussion about the illumination and light pollution within residential areas. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think everything else probably addresses, the rock crushing and helicopters and blah, 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 all that stuff. I think probably addresses more of the noise traffic, but the light traffic, I think that's a really good one that you brought up.
Well, the thing that I'm hung up on, even though if it's not illuminated, it still could be an eyesore that the residents should at least have. Mr. Cherry.
Jeff?
So you're gonna wanna differentiate. If you wanna regulate, limit or restrict, and you're gonna do that with a definition of signs being illuminated, you're gonna wanna segregate traffic control devices clear out of that.
Yep.
Oh, right.
They have to be outright exempt, so the
Verbiage.
high score speed limit signs and those sorts of things are illuminated, so you have to make sure that definition isn't captured in there, so that they don't have to get a conditional use permit. They put the,
To put up a new stoplight or something.
Or the 25 mile an hour thing that pops up. Yep.
So illuminated signs not associated with traffic control.
Yeah.
Something to the effect of.
Yeah. Commission? I think with that condition, open up for motion.
I'd like to make a motion.
Scott?
I'd like to make a motion to approve the application PZ 22-96, adding Chapter 1, Title 9, Section 7, Chapter 3, Title 9, Section 2, Chapter 7, Title 9, Section 4, with the addition of a definition for illuminated signs and what exclusions for traffic-related signage may come.
Okay. Headed first by Scott.
Second.
Second by Travis. Scott, we'll start with you.
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Billy? Aye. Travis?
Aye.
Aye for me as well. Motion passes. Moving to our second, we have an action item for an annexation from Stephanie Hopkins on behalf of the CKMH Holdings LLC to annex and zone to a C4 property located south of Air Base Road between South 14th West and Jerome Street. Mr. Cherry.
Yes. Alrighty, Mr. Chairman, city staff, this is an annexation application for approximately between 12 and 13 acres at Air Base Road between South 14th West Street and Jerome Street. We have some imagery right here for you. For a little bit more context, right next door is the United Metals project. So that you have an idea of where we are at. And what they are proposing is a annexation to C4 for the sake of pursuing multifamily development. Note that when we look into annexations, we're looking at 5 main things. That the annexation shall incorporate the city sewer planning area, that it be consistent with the current areas and impact contracts that we have within those areas, that the annexation will result in a balance of cost of services with anticipated revenue, that it promote other population balance goals, that it be contiguous, and that it not be any sort of leapfrog type annexation, and that it promote to keep city limit boundaries that are squared off and not irregular in shape. Another image I want to show us is, let's go to our current land use map. So, unfortunately, our GIS map hasn't been updated, but right next door, that's all annexed within the city. By virtue that it was contiguous with the property right across from Air Base Road. So therefore, this property being contiguous with the United Metals property and also with the city right across the road is indeed, in fact, contiguous. It is rectangular in shape and squared off. And then when it comes to the balancing of services and overall costs, the development will need to pay all associated fees with annexation. There's our water rights fee, there's the hookup fees, there's of course the impact fee. And then, long term, the city would be looking at the project, and I don't want to dive too much into the project because we have our preliminary plat where we will discuss it more in depth. But for a multifamily project which they are proposing, those are significant tax revenue dollars based on it relatively, as far as built services, our water, sewer, and road is very little. However, we do need to note that because of extra population, that we will have police and also fire services that will need to be out there, but that's why we have our impact fee. The comprehensive plan calls out this property as both commercial and residential to the south. It's kind of chopped up. Note that the future land use map designations are not finite. It doesn't have to be exactly what it is. It's to give us a broad conceptualization of this is where about approximately certain land uses should be. Therefore, staff is very comfortable with the C4 designation. That's what is around in the area. And with that designation, the applicant is able to do what they want to do with that land, which, as I mentioned before, the intent to do multifamily residential. And with that, that is all I have. We have the applicant here, and we also have their representative present. Before we get to the public hearing, please remind me, we did receive a piece of correspondence. I want to make sure that we take note of that before that process happens. But I do understand that the applicant has a short presentation and is here to answer any questions you may have.
It'd be better to save your presentation for the preliminary plat.
Honestly, depending on what staff comes back with in their portion, I may or may not do the presentation. We'll just see if there's gaps I need to fill in on. But for the purposes of the annexation, I'm not really going to go through much of anything.
Yeah, just so we don't have to hear everything twice.
That's exactly it. I'd rather
Just wanna
not
make
make
sure
you
that we'll
guys
kind of streamline it,
hear
absolutely.
everything. Yep.
Of that case then, what I'll do is we'll go ahead and send you back and we'll open up for public about the annexing and only the annexation. This has nothing to do with preliminary plat. This has only the annexation to a C4. Misty?
I was waiting to see if anybody else would come. Misty Pierce, I live in the Donna subdivision, commissioners, chair and commissioners. I know the preliminary plat is next, but I just want you guys to keep in mind the traffic that this is gonna add to Air Base Road. Thank you.
Thanks, Misty.
Thank you, Misty.
Anybody else? Okay.
Mr. Chair,
Sir?
with it still being open,
Absolutely.
I believe this would be an appropriate time to read the piece of correspondence that we received specifically concerning the annexation and also zone 2C4. This is from city resident Megan Champion. She says, "Dear commission/board members, I have great concerns with the annex and zone C4 proposal. There could be a possibility of shortage of housing in our growing city, but nothing is being done about necessary infrastructure that is crucial for survival of already existing citizens. The biggest concern, water supply. We have multiple dry wells and in the negative on output. Mountain Home has not proposed a solid solution but keeps entertaining more housing projects that will strain our essentials even more. Prices of utilities increase as the grim outlook grows. We need to put a halt to growing population ideas and concentrate on growing necessary essentials to existing underground issues. Not to mention the poor roadways, small streetways that will be congested and increased crime. I and many silent citizens of this city love living here but disapprove of this and other projects. Thank you for your time and consideration."
With that, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Commission, any questions, conversation about the annexing? If none, I'll entertain a motion.
Just give me a second.
Give me 1 second.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to annex the Zone C4 property, which is approximately 12.66 acres, located south of Air Base Road between South 14th West and Jerome Street.
Okay, I have first, I have a second.
Second.
Second by Travis. Scott?
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Billy?
Aye.
Travis?
Aye.
Aye for me as well. Motion passes. Now on to the preliminary plat for Stephanie Hopkins on behalf of the CKMH Holdings LLC to approve Eagles Nest preliminary plat consisting of 13.055 acres located south of Air Base Road between South 14th West Street and Jerome Street. Mr. Cherry.
Alrighty, so the preliminary plat, which is being proposed, if annexed to C4, is 45 lots with 38 buildable lots, 6 common lots, and 1 private driveway. At build-out, the development will be comprised of 152 units within 38 fourplex buildings. Make sure I bring up an image of the preliminary plat here. Maybe. Call the commissioners 1 moment.
Excuse me.
Alrighty, so while Chris is getting us a computer so we can bring up the site plan, I'll just go over some further details that we have about the proposed development. All political subdivisions have been notified. We know that that's a frequent question that we receive. If schools have been notified, the highway districts, and all of those. I can tell you that we received official comment from ITD. I know that traffic is something that we look at. Traffic has accepted the analysis which was provided in all of your packets, and their only comment was that the entrance to this development line up with Bradford Street. I think it's important to know that as people turn into this development, that the speed limit is actually 35 coming in. So you don't have those high speeds that are typical of Air Base Road. And they did not recommend any improvements be needed along Air Base Road. Medians, additional lane widths, none of that was required by ITD. Only the sole requirement that the roadways line up with Bradford. And then I think what I'm going to use is I'm going to use the applicant's presentation
Seems
because
fitting.
the applicant is prepared. So what we have here is a typical, what we call them is a windmill style fourplex. Each unit is 2 floors, and they kind of go clockwise around one another. Alrighty, there we go. So here's the entrance, which was referred to by ITD. As mentioned before, they are going to want that to line up specifically with Bradford. With what's right here, it looks like for the most part that it is. However, once development plans do come in, that's going to be the burden of staff to ensure that it lines up appropriately. And ITD will also reacquire that information of the applicant once they have their right-of-way permit. This development meets all of the requirements for a residential subdivision in the C4 district. whenever we have residential uses within the C4 district, we use the R4 standards. That is what code directs us to do. What also staff reviewed was the multifamily development standards for this use. Because all of these are on their own proposed lot, they had to fit certain things on each lot, such as their parking, having enough green space, what have you. In this development, they plan on having amenities. I'll let the applicant kind of speak to all of those specific terms. But what we do have is a multifamily project, 38 fourplex buildings, resulting in 150 units off of Airbase Road. And with that, I will hand it over to the applicant.
Name and address, I assume?
Yep.
Kelly Kerr, KM Engineering, 5725 North Discovery Way, Boise, Idaho. And excited to be here with you chairman and commissioners. I think staff has been wonderful to work with on this, and we're excited to bring this project to you. And so he covered the highlights of it. We did just get approval from ITD. You know, we fit within the comprehensive plan in terms of the pieces, in terms of the amenities. You know, the intent is to have a tot lot at the front of this, and having the units pushed back a little bit, and then we have some open spaces intermingled through the site, so the residents have a place to, you know, go out and take advantage of a little bit of extra open areas. With that, I don't think I'm going to dive a lot deeper into this unless there's, you know, but I'm happy to stand for any questions from the commission.
Before we go there, let's go ahead and open it up for public so we can get all questions, and then we'll just bring it back to you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
And with that, I'll go ahead and open it up for public hearing. If anybody'd like to come up and have a comment.
That's right. Brendan McCarthy, 890 East 14th North. Looking at the preliminary plat, the only, well, I shouldn't say the only, a couple concerns. One was addressed by ITD, which I think is great, that having that entrance being aligned with Bradford, so that we do have like a controlled intersection there. I think that's great. We don't want to end up with, you know, off the line and everything like that, especially when people are taking left turns. My second concern is, and I didn't hear, maybe I missed it, what is the number of parking spots in the plan? Are we going off the 2 per unit, or are we going off of a, you know, 1.5 or anything? I think that's something definitely addressed, because that's your parking, that's it. You're not going to park on Airbase Road or, you know, anywhere else. The last concern I wanted to bring up is, with that amount of units, and let's say it's 2 cars per unit, the amount of volume coming in and out of one entrance, especially onto Airbase Road, seems something to consider. I don't know if we can pull up the map, but I was just curious if there's been any discussion or looking into a second access. I know we have Autumn Road that's off to the west a bit with that back, so I wasn't sure. I know on the preliminary plat they had common spaces. It looks like the south common spot is a common. I was just wondering if we're talking about future growth, you know, that smart growth, if that's something that the developer's open to, is having that open, because, I mean, with one access, we got to start worrying about emergency, you know, services coming in. I know with a lot of these plots that we've approved over the last bit, you know, Lincoln Square, the Golf View part, they all had 2 access. I mean, Lincoln even had the emergency one that came off of the Dollar Tree and that. So just something I think we should consider, especially the number of cars that, you know, let's look at that second access, because if we looked at the map, everything that's being annexed in, it might not be too much time before we're heading south into that residential area. And if we don't approve it, we can't come back and say, hey, you know, let's do this now, and kind of come back on it. So anyway, just a few things I wanted to bring up. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Brandon.
Could you sign?
Alright, we're gonna have 30 Southeast Axtell Circle. I just had a quick thing, of course, like, he'll get into amenities, I'm sure, like you said. The only other thing that I thought about was kind of, and I've gotten questions from a lot of people when I shared this around, is there going to be like low income, or is this specific to, I guess, like the standard, or is that something that's going to come out later? I'm sure it's going to come out at some point, but the preliminary plat, or does that have anything to do with now? That's really important, because I know there's a lot of people that just can't afford a lot, and including myself, so there's just, you know, some people need some extra options for the lower income. And that's all I got.
Thanks, Karen. Anybody else?
Wait, what?
James Gilbert with the Mountain Home School District. My concern, there's a couple things. In that location, that is served by West Elementary. We're already having capacity issues at West Elementary, and that's going to continue to further create issues for us with school capacity. The other concern is that's also in a part of town that is bused to every school. What's the expectation of busing within that subdivision? So that's it.
Thank you, James. Okay, anybody else? Misty?
I don't, Misty Pierce, Commissioners, Chair. I don't want to repeat exactly what James said, but I've noticed that a lot of annexations or plots have been approved on the west side of town. And like you said, the school is bursting. They're next for trying to expand, as you guys know on the agenda. But with the Turner House, the Renway Estates, all the Silverstones and everything else that's been approved back there, Colthorpe Commons, West Elementary is not. We need another school on that side of town. And I know that the city and the planning and zoning has nothing to do with building schools, but we need to also take in consideration of the schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing on that. I'll go ahead and invite you back up, sir.
Kelly Kerr, 5725 West North Discovery Way, Boise, Idaho. So, yeah, let me just, Chairman, Commissioners, touch base on a few of the concerns that were brought up. In terms of traffic volume, so the traffic study that was conducted addresses both alignment of the drive, but also actual overall volumes, and ITD has reviewed it and accepted it, determined that this project doesn't adversely impact traffic in that area. In terms of a connection to the south that was brought up, it's really hard to commit to any kind of connection in that manner without knowing what was being connected to it. So I don't think we'd be in favor of agreeing to a connection in that case. The question about low-income housing, this isn't planned as a low-income housing development. And then the question from the school district on busing, this is planned to be bused from this spot. We've actually been coordinating with the bus stop or the bus company in terms of where they would want to have the bus stop on site, and so we've been working through that with them as well.
Jeff, did you have something?
With respect to the comment about Autumn Drive in particular, that is not in the city limits, and it is not a city street, and in fact it is, after much discussion with the county, it's a easement over private property. It may or may not be a public road, but this entity can't condition connection to it. We don't have the authority to, it's all on private, it's sitting on private property. It's probably a right of way, but that's between the county and the landowners to figure out. Half the landowners, as we heard from another public hearing, want someone to improve it, half of them don't want more traffic, and so it's not part of the city street system. It might be one of these days, if
anyway, that's not an option.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Piggybacking off of that, there was also a question about suitable parking. So we have 152 units, per the narrative letter, which was submitted by the applicant. They are planning on having 366 parking spaces. So each one of those 152 need two, so that's 304 parking just for the residents. And then everything else will just be add-on for people visiting, what have you. So a fairly substantial buffer of, I've got to do math right,
62.
62 units.
2.4 per.
And then I also want to verify what the applicant has already said, that we have received correspondence from Caldwell Transportation. It's something I'm pretty passionate about. I have a 5-year-old that I drop off to get on the bus every day. So having those coordinated to ensure that they're safe for students. I definitely have a bias to that, and I'm really glad that the school district brought it up. We got your back there. Other than that, that was the information that was questioned, and I want to make sure that it was provided to this body.
Billy?
Mr. Sherry, can you reiterate how Idaho state law does not allow us to get impact fees for the school district?
Yes. But it probably doesn't pertain.
I don't know if I should say it like that, but.
No, that's fine. I will.
Okay. Yeah.
So, the Idaho Code for Development Impact Fees lists the districts and the purposes for which impact fees can be collected. And it omits school districts, and they're omitted by design. But what's interesting, and which I brought up, because I proposed a bill that would add school districts to the list of entities that can get them. Idaho Code 67, I'm sorry, Idaho Code 5013. 67, 65, 13. This is the anomaly. So when you're approving a plat, each governing board shall provide by ordinance adopted, amended, or repealed in accordance with the notice and hearing provisions, blah, 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 a way for standards and for processing of applications for subdivisions. Each ordinance may provide for mitigation of the effects of subdivision development on the ability of political subdivisions of the state, including school districts, to deliver services without compromising quality of service. Right? It's fairly straightforward. Then it kind of gets you there, and then it says, for fees established for the purposes of mitigating the financial impact of development must comply with the provisions of Chapter 82, Title 67, which is the Development Impact Fee chapter. So it gets you almost there for impact fees for school districts, and says you got to follow the impact fee title. The impact fee title doesn't list school districts, so I tried,
Yet.
but we'll see these days. Anyway, they're not allowed. They're not prohibited. They're not. There's fire districts, water districts, they're listed in there, but not school districts. So,
And the reason I brought it up, just because of citizens' concern that was spoken tonight about this.
I'm sorry?
The reason I brought it up, just because of the
Right.
different questions that was brought up tonight, just to make sure we're transparent on that.
And Commissioner Roeder, I'm very thankful for the partnership that we have with the school district during this time of weird growth and weird economics and watching things. I can tell you that I like to think that our conversations are fairly regular about their needs. Noting the southwest part of town, a lot of people pointed out that this is a high growth area. Staff has kept that in mind as we review new subdivisions of where do we need to potentially build a new school, where would we entertain, hey developer, do you mind dedicating some land so that we can cut those costs from the school. Know that those efforts long term are happening, and hopefully we can work together in such a way where the school district doesn't have to strain more than they already have to. So I just want to make sure that this body knows that we notify them as a political subdivision, that we have those conversations with them, and we see them as good partners, and that's it. That's the soapbox.
You have more?
State could also fund
At least one more.
They could.
facilities.
Or two.
They could.
Go ahead, Billy.
Like they're supposed to.
One topic that hasn't been broached yet is the availability of water.
I can take that too.
Okay.
Water is being brought into the northeast corner of the site as a part of the storage unit development to the east.
And availability of water sheriffs, or EDUs rather.
I was looking at what we had on the sheet that I gave you before. 8th Street Station, which is 43 units. It was in 2021, so it's almost over its year, so I don't know where that is. Same thing with Mitchell Townhomes, same thing which was 43. Silverstone North was 105. It's probably pretty close to being, having to either do something to, or they're gonna lose their place in line. Same thing with LaBelle. Those are an early one from 2022. And Kate's Place, which was actually 2008, their infrastructure's probably done over there for what they have to do. So that's like 250 units, so, or EDUs, that will probably come off the books, so. And again, they know it's on availability for what we have in these units.
But at this point right now, we have availability to proceed.
If they come and get them first, there is.
Yeah.
Yes, there are.
Okay, I'll ask a question. I'm having a hard time with the density. There is a lot mentioned in your preliminary plat, a lot of housing. With that much in one area, there's not really a concise development that works in the same vicinity, if that makes sense. So according to, the comprehensive plan, you need to make sure that everything around it fits within what it is that it's going into. There's so much density going into this one preliminary plat that there's not as much density in the surrounding areas. There's a lot of single homes, there's a lot of single family homes. You have Meadows Trailer Park. I'm having a hard time with the density of it and not quite making or meeting the same standards when it comes to the comprehensive plan. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, so Chairman, one of the ways that I look at things in a situation like this is how is this city developing outward? And we're obviously kind of on the edge of the developed area. So, but what we're against is, we're against storage. There's also commercial and other elements over there, and multifamily tends to be a good transition point between your commercial and your other developments as things go further out.
I agree with you on that, absolutely. The amount that is being proposed is what's the hard part for me. Could you show me on your preliminary plat where you plan on green space?
Yeah.
Wake her up.
So the specific common areas with green space, both directly on the front of the project, and then there's specific areas here, here, and all the way at the east end, and I think I skipped that guy as well.
Okay. Do you have a drainage field?
So,
Is there a drainage field that's needed?
so we will be doing in our, yeah, and so in some of those areas, particularly in the front, we will have some drainage areas.
Travis, go ahead.
Really, front part of this green area, is this going to be fenced off? And then I would assume that you're still in talks, I understand that about the bus stop, and I get that, but I would assume that this green area would have something to do with that.
Yeah, so right now, the bus company has said that they would like this area to be
No,
oh, sorry.
no, it's fine. This might work for you.
Oh, that,
I see what you did there. Nice job.
You're welcome.
so the bus company has indicated that they would like that area right there to be where they do pick up, drop off for kids. And then in terms of the front area, yeah, the intention is to fence that area.
Oh, okay.
I'll mention one. You're part of the applicant's party,
I am, yeah.
so you can
So-
come and.
Keith Fluker, 493 Enchantment Street, Eagle, Idaho. The applicant talked about density, and when we talk about multifamily, a lot of times when you go out and you see these multifamily buildings, you see these 3-story, 52-unit buildings, and they're stacked in, they're garden-type centers. There are over 200 of them. You look at density on what those come in, they're coming in at about 24 units per acre. You look at this, we're way under that. I believe we're at about 12 units per acre. If you want to break that up and you look at that over the 12.66 acres, it's coming in that each unit would essentially have just under a tenth of an acre. You go to most subdivisions around any of these areas that are more of your, your Hubble homes, your Corey Bartons, they're all putting their houses on a tenth of an acre building. So I know this density is, in terms of the area, looks big. When you actually look at what subdivisions are doing and what they're putting in, just because they're on a single lot, it's the same amount of acreage and density that we're putting here as a subdivision. So we're not jumping up from 24 units an acre. It's down to that 12.
If I may,
Two-story.
a lot of those lots in Silverstone and Morning View are actually about 0.19 to 0.21, 0.22, up to a quarter of an acre, just based on the knowledge that I have.
Commissioner, any other questions? Scott?
Along the roadway, adjacent to Air Base Road where we're gonna have the park space, can you tell us if there's gonna be any kind of like safer barrier? When you mentioned that it's fenced, obviously, like if that's gonna be a kid's play area, I would hate to have a situation with like traffic incursion, say an accident does happen at this intersection, that vehicle incursion into that space becomes an issue. Do you have any plans to mitigate that? What type of fencing? Is there any kind of rocks, barriers, pylons, anything of that matter?
Honestly, we hadn't got into that level of detail on that design, but we're certainly happy to provide some, do some boulder landscaping to help mitigate, so if a vehicle does get through, there's an additional something there besides the fence.
Thank you.
And at this point, it's basically the plat. So basically, we're not arguing, but we're discussing the actual size of each lot and the green spaces, and not necessarily materials or anything like that. That would be a completely different meeting.
Mr. Chair.
Sir?
Ms. Drake, so this is the meeting to discuss it. So the way that the land use chart is this is an outright permitted use.
Right.
Fourplexes on a single lot, being it meet every standard we have. And I can tell you that for our multifamily, it does meet that standard. They do have the required amount of green space that our code calls for. They do have the required amount of amenities. They've checked the boxes as far as meeting those requirements.
Okay.
However, if you look to your staff report, there's more to that than just meeting the design guidelines.
Right.
Obviously, meeting the design guidelines probably makes for a more persuasive application. But one of the reasons we have public hearings is because we have to take into account the environment that surrounds the proposed project. I will tell you that our comprehensive plan has established that this type of use in commercial areas is appropriate. And you see it's fairly common. When you're going through the Treasure Valley type area, you see these huge complexes, which unfortunately are kind of built in more commercial industrial areas, not next to neighborhoods, which kind of bums me out a little bit. But I believe that the amount of people who are not here is telling to why this location works for multifamily, because it certainly is not in anyone's backyard. I believe that's one of the reasons that it's very easy to put the multifamily land use in a commercial and industrial type designation, because your typical single family neighborhoods do not feel encroached upon, and generally businesses enjoy these types of uses because they see customers. So as far as compliance with the comprehensive plan, staff has identified certainly portions of the proposed development which is harmonious with the comprehensive plan. However, we know that there's a lot to the comprehensive plan, and things can be taken in different contexts also, such as things fitting, just like Mr. Chairman brought up, wanting to know, is this density actually appropriate for this area? I think it's important to also for this body to take into consideration, yes, we have existing neighborhoods, which are much larger. I live in a neighborhood where I have a 10,000 square foot lot. However, this body has recently approved other neighborhoods which have substantially smaller lots, 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 square feet. So definitely something to consider. My last piece of advice that I would give you is the experts, to put that in quotations, myself, Idaho Transportation Department, we have all determined that they meet the minimum standards for what we have. However, just as I mentioned before, one of the reasons that we have this process is because we know there's times where the minimum may or may not be quite sufficient, but I think it's very important for this body to acknowledge that that's what the applicant has done, is that they have met the minimum standards as per our code. Now it's what role does the comprehensive plan play, and what role does this development have in that specific geographical area, which requires this body's analysis and ultimately the final recommendation from City Council. The final decision.
And I'll just add a couple more pieces. With the site plan, we actually had space to still meet minimum requirements and actually probably get 4 to 6 more buildings on this. And we elected not to do that, just because we wanted to provide, good usable amenity spaces with this. And just kind of building on staff's comments. So I don't know how many different multifamily projects I've worked on over the last 10 years. It's been kind of amazing in terms of the numbers. This is by far the least people I've had at any public hearing. So it does communicate to me that, obviously there's still some concerns, but it is a good fit for the area.
If I can, my eyesight's not as good as it used to be, but I can't see your smallest choke point between the 2 parking spaces. I see 26 feet from end to end. I'm just curious for emergency services. The tiniest one between the concrete ends for the parking.
Are you talking about the
Yeah, I would like to know the width, please.
the 26-foot
Okay, so that's
width, yeah.
beginning of parking space to beginning?
Yeah, exactly.
So if somebody's parked there, it's substantially smaller.
No. From
Outside of
Okay.
That's actual drivable.
Okay.
And we have talked to fire and have received comments back from them in the initial programming of this to make sure that we met their comments.
That was my only question.
Okay, Commission, anything else?
Anything?
usually everybody stares at their paper because they don't want to make a motion.
I can help that. I was gonna say.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Let's go for it.
If I can make a motion to approve the Eagles Nest preliminary plat consisting of 12.66 acres up to 13.055 acres. Located south of Air Base Road between South 14 West Street and Jerome Street.
Yeah, first by Travis,
Second.
second by Scott. Scott, we'll start with you.
Aye.
Christina?
Aye.
Billy? Aye. Travis?
Aye.
That'd be a no for me. Yeah, motion passes. With this one, I will be recusing myself and stepping down. Mr. Roder.
Put your little suit on.
Act like a October there.
The next action item is conditional use permit for Mount Home School District. Conditional use permit to allow addition of 3 portable classrooms at 415 West 2nd North Street.
Mr. Chairman, if we can get a statement from the chair. So that it's on the record. Chairman Waller is an employee of the Mountain Home School District.
No, that was already stated.
You did? Okay, it's
Okay.
conflict of interest.
Oh, you're from off. All right.
Yeah,
We got you back.
Over there.
Mr. Vice Chair.
you're a dozen.
Yes, sir.
Also, I want to note that I do have a beautiful, amazing 5-year-old who currently attends West Elementary. It shouldn't matter,
Yeah. It
but
doesn't.
I do have the assistant planner who was largely in charge of doing the staff report, and he will also be doing the presentation on staff's behalf.
That's cool. I'm ready to roll. All right, so Mr. Gilbert's here today on behalf of Mountain Home School District. They're proposing 3 portable temporary buildings to be placed at West Elementary School. The purpose for the placement of these buildings is to address the crowding issues that we talked about earlier on in this meeting today. Some keynotes, with the addition of the buildings, there's no intention to increase the staff number or students. This is to address what's currently there. So with that, there's no anticipated impact on traffic increases in the area. Additionally, there's going to be no water and no sewer connections to these as they are temporary, so there's going to be no water impact and no sewer impact. Staff did look at the comprehensive plan. This isn't a residential zone, so conditional use permits are required for schools and residential zones to make sure that they're compatible with the surrounding areas. We believe that this meets that. And the comprehensive plan also calls for positive partnerships between the school district and the city of Mountain Home, and we believe this would be a good positive step to address a problem that we do see right now. Finally, Mr. Gilbert and the school district have met all the application requirements, and they did meet all the public notice requirements. So, with that, Gilbert.
Commissioners, thank you. I'm just here to answer questions that you might have.
Could you say your name again?
James Gilbert with Mountain Home School District. You know, this tying in with what you guys were just discussing, I think is going to become a reality in Mountain Home here over the next decade with growth, and then with the community's unwillingness to pass bonds to build buildings. And so I'd like to tell you this is probably the only time we'll come before you, but I anticipate this same process playing out at all of our elementary schools in the near future as well. For the meantime, this project, for those of you who've been here for a while, you know that where we're placing those portable buildings is where we had portable buildings in the past. Those buildings have now been moved over to the high school. One of the things that we're looking at with this project is also how do we secure that additional area, and so we're going to fence that area in and treat it just the same as you would as an indoor classroom so that we can secure the area there. But right now for us, that building, we just have classrooms with lots and lots of kids in them. And, you know, I don't anticipate those numbers changing as we bring in new kindergarten classes. We're gonna have those bubbles of kids that push capacity where we're already at. And so, as you also add additional requirements for certain programs, we also have to have space to educate kids in that existing building, even though the number of kids may not go up. We're out of classrooms right now to be able to offer those services within the current building. So adding these three buildings will allow us to move some of our existing classes out into these classrooms and open up some of those current classrooms in the building so that we can utilize those for services that we have to provide for students. Be happy to answer any questions.
You want any questions, or do you want to bring the public?
Vice Chair, I have one. Could you explain the capacity of overage you have of children right now, just for the record?
Yeah, so I can't give you what the building capacity is. I don't have that information, but typically those elementary classrooms, anytime you start approaching 30 students, you're putting that, it's not going to be out of capacity per code, but it's going to be out of capacity just for physical space within the building. And so West has traditionally been our largest elementary school in town here. And so classrooms of 30 are fairly common in that building. And so there's a big difference between 30 fourth graders and 30 kindergartners. You know, just simple physics there and that kind of thing. But what we're seeing over the last 5 years is just consistently that we're running classes of that size, lower and lower grade level as well too. And so, you know, one of the things we looked at this year, we really needed to hire another first grade teacher in that building, and we don't have a classroom in that building. Those kids are still there though. And so what it means is just compressing kids into bigger and bigger classrooms with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for, if you could take a seat back and open it up for public comment.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner.
This time we're opening up for public comment. Just come up, state your name and sign in, please. Seeing none, we will close it for public comment. Commissioners, do you have any questions?
I have no further questions.
Say that again?
No further questions?
Oh, no further.
That's the one I wanted to.
If not, I entertain a motion then.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Go for it.
I'd like to make a motion to approve application PZ 23-18, planning and zoning's conditional use permit to allow for the addition of 3 portable classrooms, West Elementary at 415 West 2nd North Street.
A motion, got a second?
Second.
Travis, we start with you.
Aye.
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 Aye as well, motion passes.
Thanks. Awesome. All right. We have finished our public hearing and action for this evening, and we are down to new business. We have a preliminary plat extension from Johnny O'Donnell of Leap Housing, a request to extend a currently approved plat for 365 days. Mr. Cherry.
So, I'm gonna try and muddle my way through this one as well. This one's pretty straightforward. There's a requirement in city code that an application to extend a plat needs to be submitted 30 days prior to the plat expiring. Leap Housing has met that requirement. Staff can confirm the applicant met all the requirements that are addressed in this. They want to extend it for 365 where did my brain go? Anyway, so this was actually approved and signed by the mayor and It was done on June 14th, 2022. You do have the findings of fact in your packet that are all there. I don't know that there's anything else I can provide. Questions though? And we do have our grant writer here if we want to ask questions about LEAP housing.
I have one question.
Billy?
They only, correct me if I'm wrong, it was only allowed one extension.
And then they have to start the process over, correct? Just so we can switch over the record.
Correct. And Mr. Chair, another reason why we have the grant writer here is because this project, this is a affordable housing project. They're using a lot of different financing tools, and one of those tools was a CDBG grant, which does not release its monies for them to do certain improvements that they've won for that property until a later date, which is not conducive to keeping their schedule. So I can assure you that based on my conversations with the applicant, it's not because they're slowing down. They are moving forward. It's just they are going to be getting certain monies later now, and they want to ensure they have appropriate cushion and they don't do a misstep and accidentally have their preliminary plat expire.
Makes sense to me.
Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the preliminary plat extension for Johnny O'Donnell of Leap Housing. Request to extend the currently approved plat for 365 days.
Okay, first we have a second.
Second.
Second by Scott. Scott, will start with you.
Aye.
Stina? Aye. Billy? Aye. Travis?
Aye.
Aye for me as well. Motion does pass. Let's see. Any questions about department head items?
One question. The upcoming walking tour, is that going to be available versus Zoom? I know you talked about it previously.
So the upcoming walking audit is part of the master transportation plan. I don't believe we will have a Zoom option. However, you do not need to attend all of these sessions. We will have all of the materials from that. I'll make sure that gets posted online. And we can look at recording those sessions as well. But I just don't know if they're going to be able to be live or not. But that's something that we can certainly provide, Commissioner.
Okay, thank you.
Is the walking portion of that tour ADA friendly?
That's the point.
You're perfect. Helping me out.
Thank you. All right, Commission, if we have nothing else, seeing none, we are adjourned 7:18.